Thank you very much, boss, for that introduction. A very good night to the residents of Ruby Park and surrounding areas. And given the size of the crowd, I know that some of you are from areas away from Ruby Park. Let me say how much a pleasure it is for me to be standing in this area, and this would be the fourth time participating in an election on behalf of the people of St. Philip South. And as I sat there listening to Brother Arthur, a lot of things came back to me. And it reminded me as to why is it that a person like myself would get involved in elective politics. I said back in 1998, when I had taken that decision first time around, that I would leave the university to look after the affairs of this constituency. That the prime motivation back then was indeed to prevent this constituency from slipping further and further behind when compared to many of the other constituencies in Barbados. And I said back then that quite apart from all the things that could have been achieved, that the most important thing was to stop poor people from being poor. And ladies and gentlemen, if that motivation was noble, in 2013, there is a greater call to duty because poor people in Barbados have indeed gotten poor. But poor people are not the only ones who have slipped in Barbados in the last 5 years and 1 month. But the middle class, as Owen Arthur said a couple of minutes ago, their status has indeed been redefined, and there are indeed the working poor. And those who previously had operated at the higher echelons of the economic ladder in Barbados, there have been dealt a fairly telling blow as well. Because this Democratic Labour Party regime has distinguished itself in a very special way. It is the first regime that has interfered with every class and every cohort of Barbadian society, and every person, apart from a small minority, they have indeed seen it fit to make all classes and all economic cohorts poorer in 5 years. And I'm here tonight, and Mr. Arthur is right. Was around May last year when I convinced myself, and having discussed this issue with my family, not that returning to the university and getting launched into the university's business is not fulfilling. But what isn't fulfilling is for me to continue on that trajectory. And yes, it is a life of comfort. Yes, it is a life that allows you to express yourself in pursuits that people help to train you for. Yes, this is a life that brings a very good salary and other benefits. But I've come to a realization that it cannot be the life for me for the rest of my working life. When so many persons who I have grown up with, and my sisters have grown up with, and my parents, because yes, some of my parents' friends are still around. And I've seen a level of slippage in the circumstances of so many people who I hold dear to my heart. And I've told myself that I cannot do it. That I have to make myself available, and large numbers of them have indeed asked me to make myself available. And there comes a time in everyone's life when sacrifices have to be made. And the sacrifice that I am prepared to make for the people of St. Philip South and those in Barbados in general and elsewhere, because Barbados needs to be reestablished to a position of preeminence in the region. And Liz is here, and some of the others who serve in Mr. Arthur's cabinet will tell you that there was a time when within the region, Barbados took pride of place. And when others were looking for leadership in any sector, looking for advice as to how to develop sectors, when Mr. Arthur was the Prime Minister, they looked to us. And if I tell you this, I'm speaking from a position of great authority, because I have held 3 ministerial positions in Mr. Arthur's cabinet over 9 years. And I know how we were looked towards for advice in every sphere of activity. And we led regional economic development. We led development in the region on many other issues, but believe you me, as a member of the University of the West Indies who travels on university business, the region looks to Barbados for nothing. As a matter of fact, the region looks to Barbados and they wonder why a country that had so much potential and that led them for 14 years and previously under the tenure of other prime ministers led the region in many other times. And as a matter of fact, I was a very proud member of Mr. Arthur's cabinet, and Barbadians at large were extremely proud that Arthur was the Prime Minister, when the Commonwealth Secretariat could have singled out Owen Arthur for a special responsibility. That being the voice, the economic voice of small island developing states in the entire Commonwealth. And that was a signal honor for him, at least one of them, because it said to us that the entire Commonwealth looked on at us. And they understood what proper economic management of a good economy was about. And Owen Arthur was indeed the leader when it comes to managing small economies in the Commonwealth. But of course, if this election is about leadership, Fernand Stewart, and it must be one of the most closely guarded secrets, that Stewart indeed has lead responsibility amongst the heads for the implementation of the Caribbean single market and economy. A lot of you might not know this. You knew it when Owen Arthur was the Prime Minister of Barbados and was handed that responsibility because he took it seriously. And he understood the importance of CARICOM to Barbados' economic development prospects. So he took the job serious because the trading within the region means a lot for Barbados' economic prospects. But you will never realize that with Fernand Stewart, because he speaks nothing about things that are important to the development of Barbadian people. But ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Arthur said it nicely. When he said the Barbados Labour Party cares, and the reason and the express reason I'm here is because I care. And if I didn't have a passion still for advancing the cause of people in St. Philip South, believe you me, the line of very least resistance is for me to stay at the University of the West Indies. And I've come here to contest an election against someone who obviously does not care. And I'm going to give you some examples. And they're tangible examples for me to demonstrate to you that Adriel Braffett is sadly lacking in what it requires to be a decent representative. All of you who live in this constituency ought to have received by now a circular from Adriel Braffett. I visited with some families over in St. Martin's a couple of days ago. And to be truthful, one of the ladies, not the best in health, most of the day spent in the bed. And she said to me, Mr. Wood, I am so happy I've seen you. Because I got some envelopes from the other person. And I had no intention of looking at them. As a matter of fact, they still have a piece of string around them because it is her intention to put them in the bin. But I said, no, don't put them in the bin. Let me have a look at one of them. Because his circulars got to the constituents before me. And I was the most horrified man when I opened the leaflet. And it is the first time in political history in Barbados that a candidate on the eve of an election who is in search of support could produce a circular and it does not contain a single item which can be construed as a plan for the development of the constituency. I'm telling you the truth. We may have had some poor candidates before and very poor representatives before. But one of the things that any political candidate knows is that if he wants people to vote for him, he must provide a basis on which they are to vote for him. So nobody in the constituency of St. Philip South, even the unrepentant, unapologetic Democratic Labour Party supporters they have up here, the numbers are dwindling, I must tell you, that they have no basis for voting for him because he has not signaled to you that he cares about doing anything at all for this constituency, because the place to locate your plans is in the circular. So he is asking you because he thinks, of course, that the people in the constituency are foolish. Some of them he has referred to, and his friends have referred to them. At least he referred to some of them to me. About 5 months after the last election, I visited his house. I was going over to Trinidad. He told me he had some US money, and I went over there to collect it. As I was turning away, he said, "What are you doing going up, man? Come back and have a drink." And I turned back too. And before he can pour the first drink, this man asked me a few questions. And the first one was that how I used to represent them people across there. I said, "But Braffett, who it is you're talking about? You can't be speaking with constituents in such a condescending manner." He said, "Yes, man, it's them I mean." I said, "But why would you be speaking about them like that?" He said, "Because you cultivate a lot of beggars across there, and I don't like going across there and dealing with them beggars." 5 months after the election. I said, "What is that you say?" I say, "Don't like going across there because you got the soul to like to beg too much." And when I go across there, somebody bringing a light bill to me, somebody begging me for this, and my money ain't for that foolishness, my money for my family. So you know who cares. Because I represented this place for 9 years with distinction, so I was told by all the constituents. And never, ever in those 9 years could anyone who canvassed with me, who advised me, say that we have over in St. Philip South anything but decent, honorable, hardworking people in this constituency. But it gets worse than that. We have some persons living over in Ruby Territory. These people have indeed been reduced to very poor status. And all these people are looking forward to a parliamentary representative to do for them is to show some compassion and show that they care. And they reported to me, not within the last 6 months, but about a year and a half ago, I visited with them to see how they were going and to have a drink. And they reported to me that a new label has been provided for them, and they are to be deemed pimps. I mean, these things hurt. I really feel. Now, when someone is so disinterested in what it is he's doing, he could have asked for himself to be relieved. But it cannot be the case, where because people are struggling and people are vulnerable, and they have caused this economy to virtually implode, that persons who are at the bottom of the economic ladder and their circumstances are on the edge. And there are indeed the most vulnerable people in Barbadian society that they have to be treated like that. Because a lot of these people have been brought to that position because of the policies of the Democratic Labour Party. And back between 1999 and 2007, when some of us went to work with seriousness, and some of us, while others were sleeping, we understood the strategic importance of working hard and to find solutions for people's problems and to go into a cabinet and challenge each other in the best possible way so that collectively we could identify the best set of solutions to the problems that this Barbados economy would experience. And now we got a set of vagabonds who refuse to work seriously. And they look for all sorts of reasons and trivial reasons to advance as to why they could take an economy that was so well poised with an unemployment rate of 6.7% and reduce it now to junk bond status. Notwithstanding all the advice given from the Barbados Labour Party's end and by neutral political and economic commentators that trying to tax a feeble economy out of the recession is a recipe for greater disaster. And we have lived to see that the Central Bank of Barbados, and because they are so non-functional as it relates to economics and finance, they allow someone, the new governor of the Central Bank, who has no reason to account to anybody that the best way of dealing with our economic problems is to engage in a bookkeeping exercise. A bookkeeping exercise that will not stop poor people from being poor. A bookkeeping exercise that will see them try to deal with a deficit that they have contributed significantly to by raising taxes. And at a time, and over the last 4 years, what was needed was what the Barbados Labour Party intends to do, and that is to put money back in people's pocket and to re-stimulate economic activity in this small country and to let the domestic component of this economy play a greater role, because that is the quickest pace at which we can get people back to work. But they have inflicted such pain and suffering on Barbadians. And when you think that they could realize that it is a time to pull back, election is drawing near, and you will think that they will at least, in an artificial way, pull back and start giving back. They have reported to Barbadians that they do not need money in their pockets. Now, ladies and gentlemen, with the circumstances of persons in this country being hammered in such a way that obtains, my colleagues at the University of West Indies conducted a study on living conditions in Barbados in 2011, towards the end of 2011. The study was not commissioned by the Barbados Labour Party or by the private sector body. The study was commissioned by the Democratic Labour Party. And my colleagues, using internationally acceptable methodologies to determine who lives where, reported that towards the end of 2011, 19.7% of Barbadians were indeed living below the poverty line. A previous study was indeed conducted on behalf of the Barbados Labour Party. We asked the World Bank to give us an assessment of living conditions in Barbados. That study back in 2007 showed that 8.7% of persons in Barbados were living below the poverty line. And in 3 years, the damage had already manifested itself, as reported by my colleagues at the University of the West Indies. And what was also striking in that study was that they indicated that if Barbados' macroeconomic performance did not improve, and if it had deteriorated and it remained on its current trajectory, that a further 11.3% would dip below that line. And you know that in 2012, not only in the eyes of those who report on Barbados' economic performance, but just as important, in the eyes of those who do the assessments, that is, those who work at the internationally respected external credit rating agencies, that in their assessment, the Barbados economy continued its downward spiral. And in 2012 alone, this economy received 2 downgrades. So because of how I'm able to assess the economy, because of how the central bank operatives report on the economy, because of how Standard & Poor's and the other agency reported on the Barbados economy, I can say without fear of contradiction that based on my colleagues' findings, that as I speak to you tonight, about 30% of Barbadians are living below the poverty line. And while that is happening, and there are clear demonstrations of that, every day people go to sleep hungry. Today I must have written 5 food vouchers so that persons could get simple and basic things to eat. Is this really the country that we wanted in 2013? You have persons who have suffered the indignity of disconnections, and they continue to do it every day. Disconnections for water, disconnection for electricity, disconnections for telephone, disconnection for the cable. And in 2007, if I had asked any one of you where you think Barbados would have reached in 2013, none of you would tell me, not even with a government as incompetent as the DLP, that 30% of Barbadians will be living below the poverty line. And while all of this is happening, you have a prime minister telling Barbadians that they don't need money in their pockets. But everyone in Ruby Park that I have spoken to, they need money in their pockets. Because none of the principals of JADA live here in Ruby Park. The people who don't need money in their pockets are the principals of JADA. Because they have been able to engage in a relationship with JADA that continues to mystify right-thinking people in Barbados who care. Because while they have dislocated this economy in a very serious way, and all the artisans that were engaged when Barbados was going through its construction boom, artisans with pigmentation like mine, and all those who supported artisans, the laborers and the plumbers, the electricians. And this construction boom was such a rapid one. You know what we had to do in order to access the labor that is turned to our neighbors in order to get workers to come in to the construction industry. And what hurts, ladies and gentlemen, is that persons who place their faith in the Barbados Labour Party, they expense themselves. And they took a chance and they bought a whole set of equipment that is important for doing jobs in the construction industry. And in very short order, all that it took was for the Democratic Labour Party to be brought into office. And the construction industry was mashed up, and it continued to be mashed up because of their stupid and ill-timed and foolish set of economic policies. The private sector had to retreat. And the private sector retreated and retreated and retreated and continues to retreat. So that since 2008, we have had to live with the reality of 16,000 people being sent home from the private sector. And it is the private sector that provided the level of economic activity, and it was the Barbados Labour Party that fashioned an appropriate economic program so the private sector could express itself. So those 16,000 people have gone, and the hopes and the aspirations of those who function in the construction sector, they're gone too. So many a contractor found him or herself trapped. But they were so trapped that a lot of what they owned previously have been taken. Repossessions of equipment, repossessions of their houses, and according to the Democratic Labour Party, Barbadians don't need any money in their pockets. And if by chance they continue to ask for it, don't look to the government, look to the drug dealers. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a very clear demonstration, as Mr. Arthur says, that the Democratic Labour Party does not care. It must be the case that they like to see people suffering. And it has continued like this for so long, so somewhere away from the public's eye, I can imagine Adriel Braffett and the others having a field day laughing at Barbadians. And that great desire on their part to laugh at Barbadians is demonstrated in some way in what I spoke to you earlier. Because with an economy that is in ruins, Braffett could not commit to a circular, any plan, any initiative for this constituency which speaks to getting persons back to work. We have the home agriculture station down there virtually lying idle. When I was the Minister for Agriculture, 1999 to 2003, that home agriculture station was abuzz with agricultural activity. The place is lying idle. And he could not even understand that that is a place there that can be used for agricultural activity. Nothing of this sort. But it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me because when the Democratic Labour Party was busy trying to tax the living daylights out of this economy, and they were reaching into your pockets, persons living in Ruby Park and all other areas in Barbados, and unceremoniously and wickedly removing from your pockets what they should not have been removing. And one of the greatest acts of injustice was brought on many a family up here in Ruby Park and elsewhere in Barbados when they reach into your pockets via the taxes on your allowances. And anybody who has done a little bit of economics would know that Professor Modigliani established a theory of consumption called the life cycle theory of consumption, and another distinguished economist, Professor Friedman, both Nobel laureates, established another theory of consumption called the permanent income hypothesis. And back then, as a young economics student, we learned about transitory income and we learned about permanent income. But we also knew that persons' minds work as such. And even if there was a thought that a stream of income appeared to be transitory, that if you are indeed allowed to access that income untouched for a long enough period, your mind tells you that it can be treated not transitory anymore, but it can be treated as permanent. And once you have told yourself that, you would automatically adjust your consumption levels. So your consumption patterns will change so as to be commensurate with your anticipation of what ought to be a permanent income stream. So that people in Ruby Park and in surrounding areas who previously had those allowances untouched for 5, for 10, for 15, for 20 years, you must treat it as part of your normal salary. So you would never expect that a government, after you had adjusted your consumption levels to suit what you think would be a permanent income stream, that they will reach into your pockets and remind you that the allowances are indeed transitory and that they can tax $24 million out of your allowances when many a person depended on that income to meet mandatory expenses. So that once you touch it in such a way you must affect persons. So that husbands and wives in Ruby Park and elsewhere have to be affected to the tune of about $1,600 a month. And that is a lot of money. And I say to you, that when people can do these things to you, and you are defenseless, because the government has what we say in economics, the power of eminent domain. That is, they can tax left, right, and center. We can make as much noise as we like. They have the law on their side, and that is what we mean when we say they have the power of eminent domain. The law backs them to tax you left, right, and center, as they have done. So I say to you, Barbadians are very docile people. But the Barbados Labour Party, quite unlike the Democratic Labour Party, we understand the importance of putting money back in people's pockets. So if you go to the relevant page in the Barbados Labour Party's manifesto, and this section has as a caption, putting money in people's pockets, you will see And one of the first orders of business is that the Barbados Labour Party will indeed restore the tax exemption on entertainment and travelling allowance. This is an economy that can do with some type of stimulation. And when the government can come and tell you that they cannot afford to give you back $24 million, something has to be wrong. Because this is a government that has caused the national debt of Barbados to virtually double. And if the national debt of Barbados is virtually double, you would love to think that there's some things of an income-generating nature that this government can be identified with to justify such a massive increase in the national debt of Barbados. But there's nothing. In the Barbados Labour Party's time, we understood the importance of deficit financing. But deficit financing would have had to be, and we are trained in that item of public finance as well, that small developing economies must indeed engage in deficit financing because we have to build out the capacity of the country to earn. So when we did it, we transformed the airport, we reconfigured the seaport, we rebuilt the Hilton Hotel because we understood that those were projects that could sustain the Barbados economy's income-generating capacity well into the future. We also saw it fit to build up our social capital in Barbados while recognizing the importance of human resources to national development of a small economy. But we have a situation where the national debt has virtually doubled, and the Democratic Labour Party cannot show you a single project that could earn money for this country well into the future. And these things are wrong. They're wrong because it means that we, while we're here, will be forever saddled with a debt burden that is going to strangle us. But worse yet, if I look at this issue in an intergenerational way, that those coming after us are going to have to pay and pay. And it becomes worse if we do not re-engineer this economy so that while we are here, that we once again can generate some higher levels of income, earn some more foreign exchange to ease the debt burden on those to come after us. And I say to you that it is of necessity now. And you realize that hardly any time is being spent on Adrian Bradford, because I think that he has disqualified himself already, because nobody has a basis on which to vote for him. So we look to very important matters. These are things that are of import to all families in Ruby Park and all families in this constituency in general. Because we have to rebuild the economic foundations of this country so that we can get people back to work, so that the less fortunate can be looked after again, so that people can feel very good about themselves and about their country once more, so that communities can build once again and there can be a higher level of social cohesion, and persons will want to indeed participate in the process of national reconstruction. But what obtains now is a lot of individualistic behavior. Persons walk around now with a vexed look on their face, exemplifying the level of frustration and hurt and pain that they go through on a daily basis. I want to remind you of the words of Sleepy Smith. He was one of those who would have been calling for change back then. And he said that give the Democratic Labour Party a chance because this country does not belong to the BLP. And if they do not perform, kick them out in 5 years. And those words ring true tonight because the Democratic Labour Party has licked up this economy, mashed up the lives of plenty, thousands and thousands of persons in this country, and they are deserving of being kicked out. And Barbadians all across this country will indeed kick them out in search of a better life, in search of a better tomorrow. Mr. Arthur spoke about other examples that I want to speak about. Because when a government could be so wicked and callous, to have promised time and again 35,000 persons who are either policyholders or investors in CLECO that they will get back their money. It started with David Thompson. Then Fernand Stewart participated in the no confidence motion brought by Mayor, said that Mayor's no confidence motion should be punished with laughter. And on the floor of the House, yes, they are protected by all sorts of immunity. But when he can say the no confidence motion should have been punished with laughter, that Leroy Pearce is indeed his friend, and that he has a policy that he isn't moving, it is way back then in 2008 that he was making laughing sport at the policyholders and the investors. And when Thompson took up the taxpayers' money and put $10 million of our money into CLECO, he knew exactly where some of that money was passing through to and to whom. But I want to give you some hope that the Barbados Labour Party's manifesto has indeed committed to dealing with this issue. Because the incoming governor at the central bank at the time, Dr. Worrell, did give the impression that the government of the day would fiscalize the matter, and that we will bring it into part of our taxation responsibility, fiscal responsibility, and nothing has happened. That is another demonstration of the Democratic Labour Party not caring and making laughing sport at the people of Barbados. And ladies and gentlemen, they have ran their course. They've ran their course, and I sincerely hope that when persons in this constituency go to vote, and in the other constituencies, that the strongest possible statement is made. That this country we all love still. It might be compromised, and indeed it is. But Barbadians are still decent people, and Barbadians still want to work hard, but they want a government that will provide the opportunities for them to work hard. And the Barbados Labour Party, we've done it before. Back in 1976, the people of Barbados turned to us. Tom Adams came in as a young, bright man who cared. And we saw the continued structural transformation of the Barbadian economy. And new growth centers and new industries sprung up in Tom Adams' time. And we saw the birth of the international business sector. And Lynette told you about the importance of the international business sector to the development of modern Barbados. We saw the destruction of the economy between 1991 to 1994. And Barbadians once again turned to the Barbados Labour Party. And Don Arthur, young, energetic, full of intellectual capacity, he gave us 14 years of very strong, decent, and successful leadership. And there was great prosperity, and a lot of that prosperity was shared by all Barbadians. And you must be asking yourself by now, why is it that the tenure of the Barbados Labour Party has to be so different to the tenure of the Democratic Labour Party? And why is it that when the BLP is in power, money can circulate and people can get jobs, the fellas on the block can be engaged, and everyone feels good about themselves and about their country, As we put this country into the hands of the Democratic Labour Party, they mash it up. They make people suffer. And while they do all of this, they have this misplaced view that Barbados is DLP country and they can do what they feel like with it. Because Adrian Bradford and his team, they have the view that St. Philip South is cherished DLP property so that he can provide a circular that does not speak to anything he intends to do for you. But ladies and gentlemen, you had 9 years of prosperity when I was a member of parliament in this constituency. Right here in Ruby Park, there is great evidence of that prosperity in this country which was brought to you. And all across the constituency during those 9 years of my time, the prosperity enjoyed by the Barbados economy was shared and it was seen. And in those 9 years, upwards of 300 people would have gotten full-time jobs in this country in both the public and the private sector. Those who were fortunate to get the jobs in the public sector, of course, they're still employed. But a lot of the others who I thought that got those jobs in the private sector, who will still be working long into the future, the dislocation that has happened in the private sector would have caused a lot of them to be victims. So on resumption, it is a shame that you now have to get back to work in order to find employment opportunities for persons who you already did. And this Democratic Labour Party seems not to understand that one of the hallmarks of a successful and a caring member of Parliament is indeed to make people self-reliant. And the best way of making them self-reliant is to give them jobs that are indeed sustainable. And if they have a business idea and they want to demonstrate that business potential, you work with them and you give them an opportunity to do so. I am appalled. I am appalled that when I go through this constituency, that many parts of the constituency look the same way that I left it in 5 years and 1 month ago. And if you come from Gemswick, furthest points away you come up, nothing of note has happened in certain parts of this constituency. The only thing of note that would have happened is that the people living in parts of it, their lives and their circumstances have deteriorated immeasurably. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have one final speaker. I want for you to make a very conscious decision. It ought not to be a very difficult one. I have provided you with a circular too, but I understand the importance of being a representative. I understand the signal honor that was given to me in 1999 when I got the opportunity, as Mr. Arthur said, to represent my father and my grandmother, to represent my friends, to represent my sister's friends and my father's friends, and my school friends. It was an honor. And that is why, having left the university to do it, I did it in a very tireless way, because you needed to demonstrate to them that you meant business on their behalf and on their family's behalf. The task at hand is indeed a great one. And as I prepare to leave that noble institution, if called upon to do so, persons living in this constituency can rest assured that I will work tirelessly once more, because rebuilding this country and making your rightful contribution and encouraging others to make such a contribution requires that we lead by example. So, ladies and gentlemen, on February the 21st, this is not the basis for voting for anybody. This is indeed a basis for voting for the Barbados Labour Party and myself, because there is a community plan, and this is just the frame of it, and it has some very important things that could redefine the way this constituency succeeds. So, ladies and gentlemen, February 21st, your choice is clear. I have made myself available to you again, and take advantage of me making myself available to you again. Go out in your largest possible numbers and vote against misrepresentation. Vote against continued pain and suffering for large numbers of Barbadians. Vote against immense corruption in government, as we see in the Democratic Labour Party. Vote for hope. Vote for a team of persons that are intent on repositioning this Barbados economy and bringing prosperity to this nation once again. I thank you, and may the Lord bless you.
Hear the people buzz. Vote them up, hear the people cry. Vote them up, not them again. Vote them up. Things hard, and we break, and ain't got no money to spend, I tell ya.